Tickets. Tickets, please. Step inside, take a ride upon the terror train. All aboard, be fair warned, these rails house fear and pain. Find a seat, don't mind the heat, just pray the lights stay on. Upon these rails, these bloody rails, in darkness lies no dawn. Yes, step inside, come crawl or glide, with us you shall remain. Upon this ride, this hellish ride, we call the terror train. Ticket, please. James Ward Kirk Publications presents Terror Train. Episode 123, California.
Welcome aboard. Welcome to my home. I am the disembodied voice, your ghost host, so to speak. Call me Terror. Welcome to my train. Be you dead, undead, or of the living. Tonight, already aboard our cold and crypt-like train of terror is Lori R. Lopez. Adding a story this time, an extra something in exchange for her mortal soul imprisoned within these dark and bleeding walls. Can't you hear the screaming? Yes, that's right. Step a bit further, Lori, into my clutches. Lori has penned a tale of an individual carrying out the fate's bidding. Ooh. It all takes place upon a specific train. The fates prove they don't like to be crossed. No. Neither does terror. A bloody ticket is handed to our eager conductor. Oh, he's smiling so eagerly. The ticket reads, Lori R. Lopez. Fate.
Ticket, please. Fate by Lori R. Lopez. Shyly, she paced in the waiting room, a polished, gleaming antechamber, sterilized from the world below. It was her first occasion to be summoned upstairs since joining the sisterhood and being indoctrinated. Nervous, the fair-haired maiden chewed a fingernail and wondered what the meeting would be about. Had she done something wrong? Would the three ladies be present? "Welcome, my dear," a voice whispered from shadows. The hooded figure drifted forth, hands outstretched. "I am Atropos. Do not feel awkward with me." The girl immediately hid the hand lifted to her mouth behind herself, whirling to face her superior. The features beneath the hood were concealed, glimpsed only in flashes of near skullish contours, puckered flesh so old it defied time. Waxen and cratered, a lovely woman trapped in the mask of a crone. "It's very nice to meet you, ma'am." The mottled, veiny hands lowered. A dry chuckle. "I don't hear that often. I'm the one who cuts the string." A joke. Was she supposed to laugh? It seemed out of place in the hallowed hall. She compromised, giving a brief smile. "The reason I've called you and wanted to speak with you myself is to let you know I see potential. It is so easy for us to criticize, to admonish. I do not wish to discourage you." The wraith clasped her gnarled claws together, shrouded by a silvery white robe. "And yet you must do better. It isn't a matter of quotas, mere numbers. Every single thread has to be carefully determined and traced, allotted its proper conclusion. A terribly complicated process. We do things differently than in the past. Modernization. We have assistants now. Still, it hasn't changed that much. People are born, they live, they die. There must be order, a system. We are seeing too many entanglements. The balance is off. I hope you understand. These are perilous days. We chose you, Amora. I chose you. And though we believe in you, we cannot assign a destiny, present your fate, and do it all for you. We have given you a path to follow. We are beyond what is preordained, as you know. We decide our own destinies. If you are to become a full disciple, a Luna, you will as well. Yes, thank you, my lady. She dipped a knee, performing a jerkish curtsy, then dared to ask, "But doesn't everyone, to some extent?" The moon goddess bowed her head slightly. "That hasn't been settled. It's a tedious debate, an ancient argument. It is neither your choice nor theirs. Do not sympathize. They are mortals. You can't save them." "Yes, ma'am." "Do your job." The apparition receded to a dark corner. I will." She nodded, head bobbing as if on a string, like those silly toys, or the dogs that rode in the rear windows of cars. Her grandfather had one, but that was another era. He stood in line, impatiently jiggling a leg. A family was ahead of him. 3 kids, a granny, 2 parents. The little girl eyed him over Daddy's shoulder. A dead kind of stare, devoid of emotion. It was freaking him out, so he averted his gaze. Nothing interesting. Square tiles on the walls. Decorative. Mexican or Spanish. He had noticed Santa Fe on a tile, like the depot's large blue and white sign. It was named after another city, in another state. Confusing. Must be a train thing. The station was one of those historic places, imitating a Spanish mission. Tall arched ceilings, a pair of towers, red clay roof. You saw that a lot in this city, as if it were a Mediterranean village. Bored, he swiveled to examine rows of wood benches at the center of the small terminal. A man in layers of clothing hollowly regarded the floor. A woman flipped through a magazine without interest. He couldn't leave San Diego soon enough. Get some color back in his cheeks. It wasn't that the place was gloomy. It hardly ever rained. Now there was even a drought. It was simply dull. Everything washed out by the sun. Those cheery, bright rays. He felt brain dead. "How may I help you, sir?" His turn. Finally. A young blonde smiled at him across a counter as he swung back to the ticket window. "I'd like a one-way trip to wherever's leaving the fastest." He cleared his throat, and realized his words might sound a bit odd, or suspicious. He added, "I'm late for something." That didn't make sense. "I mean, I just need to get away." That was even worse. Hastily, the guy stammered, "There's a lot going on in my life. I need a break, a vacation." The girl looked at him too long. He stiffened. "Hey, don't we all?" She quoted a price. Maybe she thought he was cute, with his dark shades and stubble, haphazard bangs. Numbly, the would-be passenger searched for the cash, uncrumpling a wad of bills from a jeans pocket. His reflection on a window behind her informed him that his hair wasn't combed. Should have worn a baseball cap. It looked like he just got out of bed, in the middle of the day. He hadn't, but he might have. His sleep cycle was way off track. He shook his head and focused on the blonde. The blonde was more like it. Typical for San Diego. He had been here ages, washed up like a piece of seaweed or debris on the shore. Terrific beaches if he liked sand and waves. He didn't, of course, although one day, about a week ago, he had seen the actual ocean from a cliff, not the muddy harbor water. A gorgeous, translucent blue-green. It was like a religious experience, or what he imagined one would be like. How had he missed that? It was beautiful, but he still needed to leave. This place was getting to him. There was such a thing as too much cheer. The girl pushed a ticket and some change toward him. "Here you go, sir. Enjoy the ride." For an instant, he found himself clutching a stubbier rectangle. He was smaller, too, on the verge of entering a car at the base of a roller coaster track. The train was shorter, more intimate. It was going to be the ride of his life. "It'll make you a man," promised his dad. He was only 7. A chill induced him to shudder on a warm afternoon. The man scooped up the boarding pass and money, gathered his duffel bag from the floor, then stepped briskly away, reading the ticket. Mojave Flats. Where the heck was that? Where was she sending him? To the middle of a desert? He swung back to complain. He didn't want to be stuck out in the wilderness. A lengthy queue had assembled. He considered cutting in front. The ticket lady was already busy with another customer. "Fantastic," he muttered. "More sand." Where was track 13? That didn't sound good either. Not that he was superstitious. He shrugged and walked a short distance to exit onto the train platform. Wait a minute. He only counted 4 tracks. What was going on? Puzzled, he trudged the perimeter of the building's exterior. A fountain, colonnades, green doors. The authentic architecture wasted on him. There were local tracks on which the red trolley rumbled to a halt, unloading and loading. He didn't see any track 13. Weird. A pair of trains idled. He assumed one would be his. A garbled announcement confirmed it. "Mojave." That was all he comprehended. Not a chance in hell. He had no intention of going there. He detested hot weather. And with the planet heating up, it was common sense not to tempt fate. He should have been more specific. Glancing at the station, he strolled to one of the trains. "All aboard for Los Angeles and beyond," a conductor hailed. "So this travels up the coast?" "Every train goes north from here." The fellow wore a vest and trousers, white shirt, and conductor's cap. "It isn't the Mojave route?" "No, sir. That isn't on our schedule." Must have been a typo. A fraction of his tension eased. "Haven't ridden the rail since I was a kid." Lips pulled taut. His attempt at a grin was closer to a grimace. "Enjoy your trip, sir." The conductor pinched the brim of his cap. "I'll try." He entered a car. There were plenty of vacant seats. Stowing his bag in an overhead compartment, he sank down next to a window. It brought back memories. He squeezed his eyes shut to block them. "Do you mind?" Lids flapped upward. A portly gent in a grey wool hat with a silk band, the brim narrower than a fedora, dressed in a suit, leaning on a wood cane. The stranger seemed to want to take a seat directly across from him. "Oh, sure." He checked around. Still plenty of vacancies. Probably a talker. "Thank you for indulging me. I hate to sit alone." The man parked himself, propping the cane between his seat and the wall. "I'm Marcus Durbin. Nice to meet you." He extended his right hand. Blinking, the other man clasped it for a quick shake. "Well, my name's Fallon Bernhard. People call me Bern." Marcus sighed heavily. "Nothing like a train to point you in the right direction." Bern's mouth tugged in response. His head acknowledged the remark with a barely perceptible nod. The tersest comment emerged. "Yup." "Los Angeles?" "Pardon me?" "Are you en route to Los Angeles, Bernie?" "No. I don't really have a stop in mind." "Actually..." Bern hesitated. "Why not?" He showed the man his ticket. "I was given this." Mojave Flats. The conductor said they don't even go there. He's correct. Only freight lines now traverse the Mojave. Used to be a passenger route as well, but not anymore. Last one was the Desert Wind to Salt Lake. Discontinued in '97. Lots of freight trains these days. For a while, there were also the San Diego and Arizona passenger trains running east. You want some amazing scenery? Oh boy, ride the Impossible Railroad along the border. I saw it. One of the last passengers as a child in '51. Then, just freight. Sand, I think. That ceased too. There have been plans to bring it back, open it up for passengers and cargo. Not sure any trains are running yet. Lost track. He huffed at the pun. I've been ill some months. They say it's terminal. Hooting. What do they know? I collect trains, as you may have surmised. I own 213 sets, from vintage to recent models. Ran out of space. Always figured I'd depart on a train. Take my final ride in style. The route would depend on my destination. You can't argue with fate. Makes sense, doesn't it? A question. His mind must have drifted during a portion of the lecture. Frowning, Byrne asked, "What?" in a distracted tone. "My train theory. I suppose." The guy's reminiscence about being a passenger as a child had triggered another ripple of nostalgia. Perspiration beaded his brow. Fists clenched. "Are you okay? Your complexion is rather pale," his companion observed. He gulped the air as if strangling. "Fine," a choked reply. The train was in motion. It had left the station. He didn't notice. The train's rhythm and cadence tranquilized, almost hypnotized him as Byrne gaped out the window. Anxiety lessened. He struggled to relax. Across from him, Marcus abruptly slanted toward the glass. "I don't believe it." Bernie ignored him, fearing a subsequent sermon on trains. "Are you a religious man, Mr. Bernhard?" "Can't say that I am. Never bought into that holier-than-thou package. I suggest you start saying your prayers." The guy's voice quivered. "And why's that?" Byrne removed his shades. Durbin's eyes glistened with tears. "Because we are currently riding the Impossible Railroad. And that is, to put it mildly, impossible." "This isn't a game." The hiss filled her head like smoke, puffing from her ears. "I know! I tried. He boarded the wrong train." Amora winced at the scorching grip that encircled her wrist. Atropos seared a ring into the flesh, her touch colder than death's kiss. "Please, I'll make it happen." He is fighting the impulse, denying his blood. It might be too late. Send me there. Go, but do not fail again, bade the third fate in a snarl. The blonde ticket lady tugged her blouse sleeve to cover the singe mark and elbowed out of a bathroom stall. A woman at the sinks curiously ogled her, having heard voices. A timid query. "Everything all right?" Amora rolled her eyes to the mirror. "No, not everything. Sometimes I hate my job." Parched brown hills, boulders, a variety of desert vegetation, led to a network of worn wooden trestles and tunnels, spanning canyons and peaks. "There it is!" Marcus reverently exclaimed as they rattled through a portal. "Carrizo Gorge,
11 miles of cliffs and shafts, rising and falling like the biggest roller coaster ever built, from San Diego to El Centro, fraught by storms, fires, rock slides, collapsed tunnels. Impossible, and yet here we are. Byrne pressed close to the window, peering out at jagged promontories. Ahead he could spy a tall framework of wood-supporting tracks over a divide. They plummeted inside a tunnel, and his heart trampolined to his throat. The sunglasses in his hand slipped to the floor. Amazing! We're 1,000 feet above a river, marveled Durbin as they entered and exited blackness. Despite his terror, Byrne could not resist a few downward peeks. The gorge seemed mystical in sections, the light streaming and hanging in a golden sheen. It was a moment that lingered, suspended and dazzling. Trestles vibrated, incredibly frail in appearance. Byrne braced himself, muscles rigid. The train had slowed, adopting a cautious chug to navigate the treacherous scaffolds. This journey once inspired a lifelong fascination with trains, reported Marcus. What are we doing here? Byrne demanded. He discovered they were alone in the carriage. Lunging, he grabbed the older man's jacket lapels. What is this, huh? Your dying wish? You wanted to take one last ride down memory lane and decided to drag me with you? No, the fellow heeded him without rancor. No, I'm as astonished as you are. Ashamed, Byrne released the man. His shoes crunched brittle shards of the sunglasses he had trod upon. But you gotta love that view. Marcus beamed like a kid. His elated expression faded to concern. We're speeding up. The men crowded the window. Countenances mutely translated their horror. The train charged along intricate layers of crisscrossed supports, challenging the integrity of the structures, plowing into narrow openings defined by redwood stanchions and lintels. Posts sagged. Rotted wood creaked, splitting. Nails and spikes popped out of holes. Metal wheels scraped iron, in bursts of sparks. Above a steep ravine, the locomotive's engine dove from a curve in the rails. Fuel and passenger cars were towed off the edge in its wake. Byrne and Marcus watched the locomotive spilling from the tracks. They yelled as their coach wrenched off, wheels grinding, and dropped to the bottom of a great abyss. Rousing with a jolt and a gasp, he swallowed, then coughed. A familiar little girl locked him with an intense but vapid scrutiny. Byrne adjusted in his seat, having slumped while apparently dozing off. His buddy Marcus vanished, nowhere in sight. And the train looked different. The upholstery, his angle and location, none of it matched. He had dreamed the whole thing. Santa Fe Depot was visible with its towers, the classic ambiance from an earlier era. All aboard! A conductor heralded. The train began to move. Here we go again. Byrne consulted the ticket in his hand. Mojave Flats. So that part was real. He met the girl's eyes and gave her his best monster mug. Her own face was implacable. The eyes drilled to his soul, or whatever filled his body. The girl's family occupied seats in front of him. He was vaguely aware of several other passengers, sparsely distributed in rows. Storing the ticket in a pocket of his long-sleeve untucked shirt, he yawned and watched the signs of civilization diminish. At least nobody was yakking at him. Just that little girl and her zombie-eyed stares. She was easier to tune out. Until the three kids started singing, "Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream." Over and over. He wanted to die. Lowering his lids, he raised them to behold the car transformed by a film of smog. He had grown up with smokers, yet surprisingly hadn't become addicted. He loathed cigarettes. The acrid fumes irritated his nose and throat. Wasn't smoking banned on mass transit in California? Yeah, he was pretty sure it had been. Whoa, what was up with the crazy costumes? Is it Halloween? He tried to remember the date, the month. His brain wouldn't cooperate. The car was packed, people smoking, conversing. Everybody wore hats. Some of the men had suits. The ladies were glamorously attired in bright lipstick and skirts, nylons and heels. Then he noticed her, the blonde who sold him a bogus ticket. She had just peeped in through the glass of a closed door between cars. "Hey!" Vaulting to his seat, gaining his train legs, he lurched the aisle using seat backs for handholds. Arriving at the portal, he shoved outside and gripped the door of the adjacent coach. She sported wavy hair, a fedora with the brim curled up on one side, turned down on the opposite. "Wait!" He pursued the fleeing woman a number of cars, then snatched her arm in an empty corridor, a carriage of private compartments. "What's the deal? Are you some kind of scammer?" he accused. "A ticket scalper?" "Let go," she retorted, straining to yank free. "You've made enough problems." "I've made problems? For you? What have I ever done to you?" "I'm about to lose my job thanks to you." "Your job? Selling phony tickets? Is that what you're referring to? Your ticket scalping job?" He forced her against a wall between compartments and planted his hands on each side of her head. "I want answers. I want to know what you've done to me." "Get out of the way," she ordered. Glowering, he blinked and was slammed into the outer wall. Her garb shifted, though she wasn't clad in the station uniform anymore. She was dressed like a nun, or a monk, all in white, hair veiled with a cowl instead of the hat. "Who are you?" He was no dummy, and by now there was no doubt. She wasn't normal. "Never mind that. You only need to know one thing. There's a killer on this train." She poked the door to a compartment with a finger. It was ajar and swung wider. Bernie saw a female, then a male, lying on the floor. Bloody grins adorned their throats. Garnet puddles gleamed under heads and necks. Stunned, he backed away from the carnage and from her, retreating to the beginning of the corridor. The man fled, panicky, through a less packed car that now contained a smattering of passengers in updated fashions. San Diego wasn't so bad in comparison. This excursion had derailed. It was totally surreal. He sought to alert someone about the bodies, but encountered more dead people. Throats slit. "No!" Byrne staggered to the car before that. Further victims, he noted with dismay, slouched in their seats as if slumbering. The same drippy clown smiles graced their throats. They had also reverted to present-day styles. She was right. The killer stalked the train. He needed to do something. Warn the conductor. What if it was the conductor? He had to tell the engineer. It couldn't be the engineer, unless trains had autopilot. Contemplating who he should trust, the would-be hero sensed the blonde behind him in the aisle. Was it her? She knew about the murders. Why didn't she tell anyone? Wait, she did. She told him. It still could be her. Everyone's a suspect, he reasoned. Except the corpses. Probably. His perspiration ragged, hyperventilating, Bernie loped to the next carriage. A body sprawled in the aisle, leaking a pool of blood. There were others, in various stages of disarray, their throats slashed. A gentle squeeze on his shoulder. I had to show you. We need to stop this. We have to find out who did it, he vowed, surveying the ruined lives. She whispered in his ear. It's you. His instinct was to reject the notion. That's impossible! He ran, chest tight, lungs constricted, wheezing, convulsing like a shark out of water, flopping onto the shore. And in his mind, strobed the deadpan features of that little girl. The suffocating man traced a murder spree back to her, stumbled over bodies, sliding in blood. She was the catalyst. Her staring had caused him to snap. No. He reached the grim child and sobbed at her crumpled form. Her brothers, parents, and grandmother scattered around her. His first. Victim 0. The breaking point. Who knew why she had communicated such apathy? Such detachment? Was it alienation? He recognized the look. He had seen it in the mirror when he was a child. He gasped, reviving in his seat, trading vacant stares with the little girl whose face peered above the shoulder of her father a couple of rows ahead. He blinked, losing the contest, relieved that it wasn't too late. He hadn't snapped yet, hadn't flipped out. There was hope. Fingers grasped a folded blade, sheathed snugly by a pocket of his jeans. The knife his father gave him before that day. A birthday gift. He had carried it since he was a kid, for protection, but was too much of a wimp to wield it when it could have helped. It's inevitable. It's in your blood. She perched across from him. That never happened, and it won't. He withdrew his hand, the weapon safe in his pocket. Whether or not you believe in fate, a predestined future, you cannot escape it. Oh yeah? Watch me. Sarcastic, belligerent, he gazed out the window. A vista of sand and scrub plants streamed past. He was sick to death of sand and scrub plants. The terrain morphed to farmland, acre after acre of flat fields, crops, fences. The monotonous landscape of childhood. A shiver sluiced his veins as dread reared up from the shadows. No! He fought it, eyes closed, shaking his head. Hush, you're dreaming, soothed a female voice. His mother. Sealed eyelids tore open. She was dead, yet there she sat beside him, holding his hand. He was a boy, 10 years old, riding the rails with his parents, going to visit an aunt. Mom alternated between sitting with him and joining his father across the aisle. She had played wood and magnetic games with him, checkers, Chinese checkers, cribbage, parcheesi. He hadn't wanted to miss any of the trip, but he must have taken a nap. Commotion drew their attention to the far end, where Fallon's father stood with a bearded man the boy had seen lunching alone. Both were speaking loudly. He recalled that they had exchanged words in the dining car, his father accusing the man of staring at his wife. It occurred to him the man had gone by them minutes ago and smiled at his mother. Dad jumped to his feet and chased the guy, who relied on walking sticks. An argument escalated. His father could be very aggressive in public or at home. He seemed to crave hostility, altercations. Other passengers were staring. Fallon tried to scrunch down in his seat while his mother hugged him. He could feel her trembling. "Do you expect everyone to feel sorry for you?" "No, I expect to be treated like everyone else, with decency and respect." "You think you can do whatever you please? Go away. I don't have to talk to you." "What about my wife? Do you want her to talk to you?" "I feel sorry for your wife and your son." "Why don't we ask her if she wants to talk to you? What do you think about that?" "I think she deserves better." "Than me? Or do you mean you? Get out of my way. I won't play your stupid games. You're trying to humiliate me." "Oh no. You're doing a pretty good job of that yourself. Have you seen how you walk?" "Leave me alone, you ignoramus. Step outside and say that. I dare you. Let's see what a man you are. My son could knock you down with one punch." Hector Bernhard opened the door. "Be my guest, loser." The aggravated cripple stumped onto the platform between cars. Hector sauntered after him. The door closed. All eyes were riveted on them as the men raged at each other. Hector clasped the man's shirt with his fist. Shouts flew back and forth. Then Fallon and scores of witnesses in the linked cars watched Hector deliberately push his adversary from the train. Cries arose. Men converged out of both carriages to seize Hector and hustle him roughly into the coach where his family sat in shocked silence, their embarrassment acute. The conductor was fetched, accompanied by porters. They guarded the killer, who was escorted off by policemen at the nearest station. His wife and son endured critical stares, the ostracism of passengers for that eternity, then disembarked for hours of questioning. The victim had toppled as the train crossed an iron mountain bridge. His body was later recovered at the base of a gorge. Fallon's father eventually died in prison due to a dispute with 3 convicts. The boy's mother couldn't bear the stigma of the public scandal and took her own life, cutting her throat. Bernie had been raised by relatives of his father, who punished him for their troubles by putting cigarettes out in his flesh, marking the kid's torso with circular scars where it wouldn't be obvious at school. He had a doctor's excuse to get out of gym class for being extremely asthmatic. This proved to be from stress, and later went away. Life is but a dream. Those children were singing again, wresting him to the present. So, you see, you can't prevent the future, just as you couldn't outrun your past. The blonde smugly folded her arms. I refuse to accept that. You don't get a choice. I refuse to accept that too, he shrugged. It isn't an option. She gestured frantically. There are rules, okay? You need to fulfill the actions that have been laid out for you since the moment you were born, like when you were small and your mother arranged your clothes on your bed. Until the day I declared I was big enough to pick them myself. You don't get to do that here. The fates control mortal lives, determine your fortunes and woes. Clotho spins the thread. Lachesis measures it. Atropos severs it. That's the way things are. We all must submit. If you're talking about gods, forget it. I'm not into theology. It's about cosmic order, maintaining the balance, and doubting is allowed. The universe will keep going just fine. It doesn't need your approval. You're not its center. You're one string, and that thread is woven together with a bunch of other strands. Everything's connected. Do what you're meant to do. Or, if I don't, the whole fabric will unravel. Something like that. Wow. I'm important. Don't flatter yourself. You're not that important. You're a psycho. I'm not a psycho, he argued. I don't care what I saw. I'm not capable of a rampage. It isn't in me. Why would I commit those atrocities? Because your childhood sucked. Your daddy was a murderer. Mommy abandoned you, killing herself. With a knife, in fact. Because you remember that uncomfortable ride to the next train station. You remember the faces vividly who stared at you. Symbolic transference. That's why. Sorry. Not me. Ugh! She threw her hands to the sky. I don't believe this. That makes two of us. It doesn't change anything, you know. They forecast the outcome. It's prophecy. The future is as concrete as the past, recorded like history. They can't make predictions, educated guesses. We're not the weather. We're individuals. She straightened. Good luck. I don't know how they're going to take it. I have a feeling it won't go well for you or for me. You didn't spare anyone. These people are doomed. Nobody makes it out alive. Nobody buys a round-trip ticket for this train. That's bleak. An ironic smirk. Enjoy the ride. Amora marched toward the aisle, hoping to get off before the last stop, Mojave Flats. The car bumped, hitting turbulence, flinging her on the seat beside him. Temperature increased. Desert whisked by, melting panes of glass in a blur of sulphurous despair. It was the end of the line. One way. The graveyard of locomotives. This destination wasn't named on maps or schedules. Like the iron tracks, the ghost train became red hot, liquefying to embers of molten metal, surging forward, sinking into the shimmering orange-yellow sands. The man and woman clasped hands, their final conscious act as energies combined. Souls evaporated. Flesh and bone converted to ash in the stardust of the universe.
Yes, our guests have taken their permanent seats. From New York to time infinite. Are you ready to join them? Perhaps another story will lure you. Choose a car, any car, for the time we had a permanent guest, as they tell their tales of horror at its best. Come, yes, join me. My name is Terror, who rides the rails eternally upon the terror train.
Survived this trek? No turning back. Dare resist, just try. Step back inside, we'll be your guide. So many ways to die. Upon this ride, nowhere to hide. With us, you shall remain. Upon this ride, this hellish ride, we call the Terror Train. Terror Train Podcast, Episode 123, California. Produced by Krista Grabowski, David Schütz II, and Mary Genevieve Fortier. Podcast directed and arranged by David Schütz II. The Conductor, your narrator, was created by and played by David Schütz II. Terror, the Disembodied Voice, was created by and played by Mary Genevieve Fortier. Terror Train Podcast opening and closing poems written by Mary Genevieve Fortier. Host segment dialogue for Terror, the Disembodied Voice, written by Mary Genevieve Fortier. Production music: The House of Leaves, Chase Pulse, The Hive, and The Voices by Kevin MacLeod. Incompetech.com. Featured work: Fate, written by Lori R. Lopez. Production music: Fantastic Dim Bar, Martian Cowboy, Reign Supreme, Sunset at Glengorm, Lightless Dawn, Veins, Thunder Dreams, Nervous, Quinn's Song The Dance Begins, Red Letter, Road to Hell, Metaphysic, Penumbra, Controlled Chaos, Decay, Cryptic Sorrow, Gathering Darkness, and Return of Lazarus by Kevin MacLeod, Incompetech.com. Additional sound effects by AudioSoundClips.com. Podcast program edited by David Schütz II. The stories and poems presented in the Terror Train podcasts are all featured in the James Ward Kirk Publishing Anthology, Terror Train, which was edited by Krista Grabowski and A. Henry Keene. Cover art by Stephen Cooney. Content copyright 2014. Terror Train, Podcast Episode 123, California. Copyright 2014.